Let us call on our good friend and political analyst Dick Morris, the author of the new book, Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. Dick, as we digest this developing story, your reaction to what has happened in Paris and both the national security and political fallout of this attack.
Well, in a way, it's been a positive development in the war on terror because the attack took place in France, and it probably will reinforce and strengthen the determination of our allies to be aggressive in going after these terrorist groups. Although you can never tell. When there was a train bombing in Madrid right before the Spanish election about 10 years ago, Spain just folded completely, pulled its troops out of Iraq, and said, we're not fighting the war on terror anymore. I hope
Dick,
the French don't have that reaction.
John here, and I wanted to ask you specifically about that. You know, this might be an opportunity for a lot of people in France to say, we don't want to be a part of this. France, of course, has been out front. They've been one of the first countries to respond and join in with the coalition-led airstrikes against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Do you think that the resolve will be there, this will strengthen that, or do you think there will be a lot of folks in France who say, you know, we're done now?
Well, I think there's always going to be that element, certainly in France, because of how horrifically it suffered in World War I and World War II, and it left a legacy of strong anti-war sentiment. And don't forget, about a quarter of the French electorate is communist at heart. They voted for communists when they could. But I think the fact that the attack was on a magazine in France, a satirical magazine that had made fun of the Prophet, I think that that is going to strike a chord with the French as opposing their liberties and conscribing what they can read and absorb and laugh at. And I think that that's going to strike closer to home than had the militants, for example, struck an air base or French army facility.
Well, as you talk about it striking closer to home,
there's a dividing line in French culture between the army and the literary world. The army is regarded by many Frenchmen as sort of the enemy. There have been coups d'etats, it's been a separate force, and in many cases it does not enjoy a lot of support from the French people. On the other hand, the literary side, the left bank crowd, loves their writers and their magazines, and I think that this will have an impact on them because it really is a free speech issue, not just a terrorist issue.
Dick, if I might, there is another division in French society between native Frenchmen and the influx of immigrants from Muslim nations, and it is something that has never really been fraught with assimilation. In fact, some refer to all of Europe, perhaps a future of Eurostan. Will the French move now assertively to have assimilation of these newcomers into their society? What do you expect to happen there?
Well, there needs to be, and I hope that they will. It's very important that we understand that the French Muslims are very different from the American Muslims. In the United States, they're largely assimilated. They largely live among us. There may be a concentration around a particular mosque, but largely they're constantly intermingling with us meaning non-Muslims. In Paris, for example, you have a ring around the city of Islamic suburbs where the French police dare not go. There really are no municipal services there. The courts don't work there. The Islamic courts patrol. Sharia law really governs. And there's been no real effort to assimilate them. The hallmark has been diversity, of having all different groups living side by side, but not a melting pot. And increasingly, I think the Europeans are realizing they need to have a melting pot. Merkel, a few years ago, rejected the idea of diversity and embraced the idea of assimilation. And I think that this will hasten that. But what the French need to do is to end these no-go areas around Paris and really integrate them into society. I think the other point that you make is a very good one, though, J.D. I think that this will strengthen the increasing restiveness within the European public against unlimited immigration from Turkey, because Turkey is a member of NATO, and it's easy to get in from Turkey, and it's easy to get into Turkey from Iran and other countries. So you have this constant flow of immigrants, and once they're in the European Union, they can go anywhere in the European Union without even passing any frontiers. And I think the impetus among the British to withdraw from the European Union by the United Kingdom Independent Party, UKIP, that won 17% of the vote in the last election, I think is a very strong one. And I think that it will find an echo in France, particularly as a result of this incident.
That movement is in the United Kingdom, as you mentioned, also in France and elsewhere in Europe. There is a growing sentiment of concern about this unchecked immigration into these countries. Dick, what do you expect the immediate reaction to be from the French President, Francois Hollande now? We know that he's condemned the terror attack, but moving ahead, what do you expect out of him later today?
I think there will be renewed or an increase in French military activity in the Middle East against ISIS. I don't think he can not respond. And I think that this may provide an impetus for an increasing focus on ground troops. I remember that when President Clinton was talking to President Chirac about the appropriate response in Bosnia when that crisis was brewing, Clinton only wanted to do airstrikes, but Chirac wanted ground troops. And he even at one point waxed eloquent about the honor of France required that they put troops in there, not just bomb from 30,000 feet. And Clinton told them to stuff it. But I think the French are more willing than Americans have ever been to commit ground troops. They already have ground troops in a lot of African countries.
And
Chad
on that
and
note,
others.
Dick, forgive me for interrupting. We're up against a break. We're going to ask you to stay through the break. We'll continue our discussion, specifically the fallout here in the United States from today's terror attack in Paris. That's just ahead on America's Forum.